I'm going to be showing a cool trick in Babel, which is basically being able to create notes from a text by doing selections. For example, you could take this first sentence and then add a note related to it, like check references for date. Then you would hit save and you have it here with associated highlighted text. If I took this other sentence, for example, I could say great start. Very powerful. Imagine you were doing some proofreading for a friend and you had to revise that text. Something else that I will show you how to do is how when you click on one of these notes, you see it highlighted in this other text element. Okay, this is actually HTML, and this could be very useful if you wanted just to show in a very large text what part of the paragraph is the note referring to. And I will also suggest a way of doing this instead of by clicking, by hovering over the note. But for that you need a paid plugin and I haven't used it in this case. Let's get started. Let's first show how you can create a note by selecting a part of the text and then typing in a multi-line input. I have here an element which is called a selector, and I am using it because I installed this plugin. This plugin is called text selection, and it's the one that is going to allow us to detect what text we are selecting with our cursor. So this plugin is created by Erdev. This is a very good Babel agency. They have a lot of plugins, and usually it means that these plugins have support and that they have been well thought. And this is the case. It's a very simple plugin, so the only thing that you have is this selector element in the visual elements tab, and you can take it and drop it in the page. And as you can see, there's really nothing that you can do here, but you can access inside this element the selected text in your page. So here, for example, I have an HTML element, and the group as data source, it has the selector A selected text. If you try to get something else, you see that there isn't really anything else, just the selected text. But this is really all we need because we will be using it then in the HTML element. But before showing you how I'm highlighting the text, I want to show you how I am creating these annotations in the first place. If I had a button like this one and I was clicking after selecting, this would be very simple. I'm going to show you how it would be done. We can see here how if I select part of the text and I hit annotate, the same thing happens as before, right? I have this workflow where it says if the button annotate is clicked, you display the data in a pop-up and then show it. Which data? The selected text from the element. So this is very straightforward. You just look for the selector element by typing selector, and then the only option that you have is selected text, and automatically it's getting the text that you have highlighted. However, we have done it a little bit differently before without a button. So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to enable a workflow that is a bit different. This workflow says do when selector selected text is not empty, and then it has the same two actions, display the data and show it in the pop-up. To find this workflow, you need to look for do when condition is true, and then you want to check if the selected text from the selector is not empty. And you might think, is this going to run every second? Is this going to check all the time if the selected text is not empty? Not really, only when the selected text changes, which is what we want. But for that, to do it every time that the selected text changes, you need to check here every time. Otherwise, it will only do it the first time. And this is the workflow that I have set up here. You see how this is the same, and then we're displaying the data and showing it in the pop-up. This is the button in the pop-up. We are creating an annotation with highlighted text, the parent group's text, the text that we're sending to a pop-up, so the text we're highlighting, and then the note, which is the multi-line input value. Then we reset the inputs, we hide the pop-up, and we have a new annotation. Here I have a repeating group where I am just doing a search for all the annotations. So I'm going to show you that. Here I'm searching for the annotations and I'm just sorting them by the creation date. And then inside the repeating group, I'm just showing the highlighted text first and then the note. How do we do the second part where we click and then highlight the text in the HTML element? Here I have a workflow where I am setting a custom state in the page called annotation, but it's basically note or annotation, and I am just giving it the value of the current cell's annotation. And then what I am doing is inside the HTML element, and this is the most tricky part, I am getting the text, and to be able to apply conditions to the text, what I am doing is putting a condition that is always true. So current date time is not empty. This is always true because always current date time is always going to be a value. And then I am only filling the formatted for yes part because this is always going to be yes. So this is the value that is going to replace this expression. And then once I have this as an expression, I do some find and replace. And I am getting the annotation, which is the custom state highlighted text, and I am replacing it with this HTML. So it says span style background color yellow, and then the same piece of text, so the highlighted text, and I am closing the span. And what this means is that it's going to take the highlighted text and then it's going to put this around it. So the span style background color yellow and this other span to close it. If you want to change, and instead of doing yellow to red, you just change it here. And if we refresh and try it again, we'll see that once we click, this is red, right? And then if we create like I'm just gonna create like a node that is a bit absurd with one letter to show you. And if I click here, you see how we are selecting all the instances of I in the HTML element. Okay, in case this first part wasn't clear, I'm gonna create a post here to show you a bit more clearly. So this could be the text or whatever. Imagine it is a newsletter post or issue, right? And then you have the body there. And if we come here and we create a newsletter, just to show you that it works without this added difficulty. I'm going to remove this. I will do a search, newsletter issue. I'm gonna get the first item and I'm gonna get the body that we just created. And now we do the find and replace. I'm gonna copy this part, which we're going to be using. And now I'm going to be taking this piece of code. This is actually a little bit different, but I think it's better because I'm not putting yellow anymore. We're gonna be using hex code. And here I'm gonna be putting the same dynamic expression. And now if we go ahead and update the page, you'll see how we're gonna get the same thing. We're getting the body I just created and replacing the instances of the annotation that we have clicked. So here, if I click, you'll see how we're getting that highlighting in the text. Now, what happens if we wanna do it on hover instead of click? So here we have a problem because we are actually accessing a repeating group cell. That's what we want. We want to do something on hover of a repeating group cell. And this is not something that we can do in the workflows. So we can access a group being hovered. For example, we can check here for do when and then get even the repeating group in full, right? So we can do an action when the repeating group annotation is hovered. But we cannot say do an action when the repeating group annotation cell, so this particular row is hovered. And that's a problem, right? Because that's what we want to do. It's no use for us to know that the repeating group is hovered. What we want to know is which cell inside the repeating group, which one of these nodes is being hovered. But for this, I found a plugin that does the job. It's called Super Communicator and it's created by Rob Blake. This is a paid plugin and he actually has this demo page where you can see how when I'm hovering over a cell, this item is changing, which means that the outside is communicating with the inside. And this could be very useful if you need to implement it in your app. But otherwise, if you don't want to pay and clicking is enough, you can set it up with the tip that I just showed you. And that's it. Hope it's helpful. Follow us for more tips and send us more questions because we love making these videos. Okay, cheers.